Great. Well, I want to just thank all of you for joining us today for another Distributed Energy Resources webinar. This is one in a series of webinars that we're hosting over the last half of this year. My name is Eric Viam. I chair the SLO Climate Coalition. I'm really pleased to have you with us. We're going to get started and let everyone else kind of jump in as they're able to join. If you would, start by just sending a message in the chat to everyone, introducing yourself and the organization that you're connected with. That way we can get a feel for who's with us today. The conversation today is what are CCAs doing for distributed energy resources now? We've had the good luck of having community choice programs in place for over a decade. And those programs that are a bit older and more mature than Central Coast Community Energy have been doing a lot of great work in terms of confronting issues, really laying the groundwork and cutting a path forward around programs, connecting programs and procurement, and in general advancing possibilities around distributed energy resources. And so today's webinar is intended to support a regional conversation looking at opportunities to realize a vision of community-driven energy that achieves our goals of decarbonization, equity, resilience, and economic vitality. I'm going to briefly introduce our organization. So again, I chair the SLO Climate Coalition, and one of our flagship programs is called Unifying the Central Coast for Action. And we are working with stakeholders from across the 5 counties of the Central Coast, helping to support climate leadership, shaping policies and programs, and advancing what's possible, the vision of our community choice energy program and our regional member jurisdictions in their climate leadership. We are really an ad hoc group of stakeholders that believe that community-driven energy is the path forward to achieving our broad vision of decarbonization, resilience, equity, and economic vitality. So just really briefly, I want to just share with you what we see as the possibility of community-driven energy, and start by saying that we're in the midst of a global energy revolution, and that during this moment there is an opportunity to transform our energy system in a way that hasn't ever been possible before. And this, for us, looks like energy democracy, which means meaningfully empowering communities and those that have historically been left out. It looks like being of service to our communities through economic vitality, health, and resilience. And it looks like climate and environmental protection through clean energy, electrification, and demand reduction. And really at the core of that, we see local energy resources being really critical in helping to realize these goals. So in terms of our vision for our community choice program and for being community driven, we see decarbonization, equity, resilience, and economic vitality looking like these things: investing in low-income customers and communities of concern, empowering working people through labor standards and workforce development, organizing local support, really activating latent political will across the region to support pro-community choice policies at the state level, open, collaborative, community-driven, really unlocking customer-owned and local distributed energy resources, really being innovative to create unique value beyond cost savings, and including demand, managing demand through energy efficiency, conservation, and smart appliances. And then, of course, using all of the tools available to accelerate energy transition, equity, and resilience. And in this vision, just to really briefly define for us what we mean by local energy resources, this includes a diverse mix of local, community, and customer-sided resources. We recognize that the current paradigm favors utility scale resources, and we acknowledge that that is going to be that we really embody in all of the above approach that recognizes the important role of utility scale resources and also sees the critical value in developing a mix of local, community, and customer-sided resources across these different definitions, different types of resources: conservation, energy efficiency, renewable energy and storage, demand response, smart appliances, microgrids, data, those sorts of things. And what we see as a possibility is that the Central Coast, if we look at the economic flows of our energy economy across the 5 counties, we have estimated $5 billion in annual activity that we can convert those fossil fuel dollars, most of which leave our region, into clean energy dollars that we are investing into our communities to accelerate decarbonization, support equity, support resiliency, and to help build our region's economy. And so that's what we see as a possibility. So I want to just thank our special guests for being here today. We're blessed to have representatives from 4 of our leading community choice energy programs that are going to be speaking with us about their experiences and some of their flagship efforts related to distributed energy resources. Before I turn it over to our first speaker, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And I want to particularly thank the Romero Institute, which is an organization working in partnership with the SLO Climate Coalition to help to advance the conversations around distributed energy resources and other key priorities. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Matthew Marshall, who I've had the pleasure of knowing Matthew for many years, it feels like already. And he's the CEO of Redwood Coast Energy Authority. And so just to give you a quick overview before I turn it over to him, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from our 4 special guests, Matthew, Jim, Carolyn, and JP, 10 minutes each. And then depending on kind of, we'll have a poll to see if we have a scale of a group where we need to go into breakouts, or if we can stay together and have a conversation all together for another 20 minutes. So we'll be able to dig in deeper, and we'll make a decision then. And then at the end, we'll have just a few moments to debrief and to talk about what's next. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Matthew. And again, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'll just say my title is executive director, not CEO. So I like it that way because we're a public agency that serves the community, and not that a CEO has to be a corporate title, but I'm glad to be an executive director, not a CEO. So we had a few questions, and I'm going to assume that folks know what like resource adequacy requirements are, and so that's really just the compliance mechanism for reliability in power procurement. But if there's questions about that, maybe that's something we can dive into in the Q&A period. So I'm just going to kind of dive into the 5 sort of questions that were posed to us and talk about what we're doing. So a little bit about RCEA. We're a joint powers agency up in Humboldt County that serves the county of Humboldt and the cities within the county, and we've been operating our CCA program since 2017. But I think actually somewhat different than many of the other CCAs, we actually were established as an agency back in 2003, and that the original funding, the original kind of focus was really on energy efficiency and customer programs. And so to some origin story of many CCAs, where we started out doing customer programs, and then quite a bit later we said, oh well, why don't we launch a CCA for the community, as opposed to launching a CCA and then adding customer programs around distributed energy resources after the fact. So the first question was, what do you see as the business case for distributed energy resources? And I would say that's really built for us around our goals to provide local investment. And as a public agency, we're like, what can we do for the community? It's not about our own sort of business case. And so fundamentally, ways to spend our energy dollars locally are kind of at the heart of what we do. And our strategic plan was really built around that. And so for us, it's about how can we, rather than going out and contracting for resources out of the area, can we do things locally, and then but not just spending our dollars locally, but we get other benefits as well from those kinds of initiatives, as far as obviously direct benefits to our customers. If we can pay a customer to provide a resource instead of hiring a third party power provider to provide that same resource, that means we're directly benefiting our constituents, but also other kinds of benefits within the community. So I think there's an inherent bias for us towards local resources and distributed resources. And as far as our plans or goals around that, in the list of resources, I just provided one, which is our strategic plan. When we launched our CCA program, well, even going back to when we were founded back in 2003, a big focus was on energy efficiency, conservation, investing in the community, local job creation, local economic development, and also local energy resilience. And so, those sort of fundamentals were a big part of when we launched the CCA program, and we were trying to establish our goals for the program. What it really came down to is, well, we want to maximize the use of local resources while still maintaining competitive rates. And so, and when we took that sort of one sentence sort of mission statement of like, hey, we want to maximize the use of local resources, we had some specific targets around customer programs and distributed resources, and supporting that in our sort of launch period goals for the CCA program. And then in 2019, we spent about a year updating our strategic plan, which is called Repower Humboldt, which is the document that's linked there. And in that process, both it was sort of reiterated by our board, as well as a lot of community input, that there was a big interest in customer programs and supporting distributed energy resources, and that sort of manifested itself in that plan, as far as our priorities, to really put that as a top objective of what we do, as far as supporting local investment and local programs. As far as how we're doing that today, we have two resource adequacy contracts right now that are distributed energy resources. One is with LEAP, and that's a virtual power plant RA contract. That one's not Humboldt specific. It's their sort of statewide portfolio of resources that are smart enabled devices and such, that we're using to meet some of our RA needs. And then we're just launching a behind the meter storage program, working with Swell as the vendor we selected through an RFP. And that'll be actually using customer storage systems, to basically aggregate those customer battery storage systems behind the meter, and use that as an RA resource. And so that program's just launching and getting out the gate. So to that extent, we have two current contracts that are using customer side of the meter resources to supply RA compliance. And then for the recent near-term reliability mandate from the CPUC, we're going to be launching a request for proposals that's going to have a similar sort of focus on local resources and distributed resources, to the extent feasible, to help us meet that new requirement from the CPUC. So those are like the formal RA compliance activities we have going on. But as I mentioned, energy efficiency has been what we've focused on since the very beginning. And so we have a lot of programs around, just in general, energy efficiency and conservation, and customer focused efforts, as well as increasingly on solar and storage. And I think now that we have those programs as well as the CCA, we're looking more and more of how can we kind of leverage those customer programs to achieve both benefits to the customer, but also reliability benefits. We have a demand of response program that's an incentive for customers to conserve, and so that's something that we did since we launched the program, around peak day pricing type structures. And then we're doing a lot more around fuel switching. So we're ramping up rebates for building electrification, heat pump systems, as well as electric vehicle incentives. And one of the things we're trying to do is sort of future-proof those customer incentive programs to enable smart devices, both on water heating, space heating, electric vehicle charging, so that we're able to tap into those systems that are getting installed from our incentive programs down the road. There'll be smart devices that can participate in demand response type programs in the future. So that's kind of what we're doing now. As far as what are we most excited about? I think all of it. It's sort of an ecosystem of solutions, and I think we've always been excited about not kind of looking for one silver bullet, but kind of having this diversity of options and resources in our portfolio. But I would say probably a particularly relevant one for us as a rural community is microgrids and renewable backup power systems that have renewable generation as well as storage integrated into it, because you can kind of get that like day-to-day renewable energy benefits, both for the customer to be able to manage their costs, to generate clean power, and clean power when you need it is obviously a big benefit. But by kind of enabling that sort of, whether it's at a microgrid scale or just at a facility level, having that resilience emergency response capability baked into that renewable system adds a lot of benefit to the customer and the community if it's a critical facility. And then you also have the opportunity to provide grid services and more sort of reliability resources by having the controls and the ability to kind of manage that resource, both for renewable energy generation, but also for reliability. And so I think having those kinds of integrated systems at a facility or at a microgrid level lets you get your renewable energy and customer benefits as far as cost savings, but you get emergency response, you get grid services. And so that kind of package, I think, is something that we're very excited about. And last, I'll just close on, what are the challenges we've seen? I think they kind of go, as far as scale, you can kind of go up the ladder, and I think the challenge of distributed resources is that they're smaller. So there's a lot of transactional costs of working with individual customers as opposed to centralized systems. I think we've seen the CAISO and sort of state rules are continuing to kind of be evolving and so working through, and then just overall the RA market volatility and in general market long-term investments in that kind of chaotic market environment. As far as how to solve those, I think going from small to large, good investment in program design and having good partnerships can help solve those partnership customer level activities. And then at the sort of like rules level, it's just about working through the bureaucracy at the state level to make sure that we get good rules out of it. And then when you get to kind of the market RA challenges and that market volatility, that's kind of more at the regulatory legislative level of having good solutions that create stability. So, I think there's challenges customer up to like Sacramento, and there's different kind of solutions that, we need to work through at all three of those levels to be successful. So, but thanks again for having me, and looking forward to the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthew. Great to hear. In just a moment we have left, we have about a minute here. What I found really interesting in reviewing your strategic planning document was some of your goals, which I highly, in the document we linked, there's a link to that document. So take a look at that. But could you just briefly speak about some of the goals that that RCEA set for itself?
Yeah, so at a high level, we've set a goal of trying to get our power mix to, the get off of fossil fuels by 2025. So, trying to do our part to accelerate that goal. But, our strategic plan is kind of built around 4 kind of pillars, which are regional coordination and planning, integrated demand side management, transportation. And for us, that's really more about fuel switching. We're not the the transportation planning organization. As far as local governments in our area, we're not running bus service and stuff like that. So our focus area as an organization is supporting those things, but focused on the sort of fuel switching element of transportation. And then obviously our CCA, utility level services. And, I think we look at those as all kind of being integrated, on the planning front. It's a lot about building partnerships, but also about, really getting to, our goal is to all of our critical facilities in the community should have resilient power systems. That's true anywhere, but, especially for a rural community, that's important to us. And we want to do that in a way that, targets renewables benefits besides just putting a diesel generator. And I think that's something that, from a messaging standpoint, if we're going to get off of fossil fuels, we need to make sure that it's, not just more renewable, but, equally or more resilient and, more affordable. And so, rather than compromising resilience and emergency response capabilities, if we can implement solutions like microgrids to say, hey, you're getting your renewables, but you're actually getting better resilience and better emergency response capabilities than you had otherwise. I think that's the approach that we're really focusing on here.
Great, thanks for that. Fantastic. Definitely a lot more to explore there, but sounds just like RCEA is really leading in a lot of ways that we'd like to emulate. All right, we're gonna now move to some neighbors a bit further south. MCE Clean Energy. We're pleased to have Jim Bach with us. He is the Distributed Energy Resources Manager for MCE, and let's turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. I'm going to do a quick presentation. I'm going to try and answer some of the questions with the presentation. So if I could just share this with you all. All right. So MCE, Marin Clean Energy, formerly Marin Clean Energy, is a CCA that serves customers in Marin, Contra Costa, Napa, and Solano counties. We were the first CCA formed in 2008, began service in 2010. And we've been, laser focused on trying to keep costs low while providing green energy, clean energy for our communities. The board recently, or as of 2 years ago, authorized $7 million for a resiliency fund to recognize all of the wildfires and public safety power shutoff events that have been happening in PG&E's territory. And it particularly had disproportionate impacts on vulnerable communities. And that's another one of our main goals, is to try and support disadvantaged low-income communities. The challenges also occurred from having a lot of polluting diesel generators that were being bought for backup power that, again, had a disproportionate impacts on our vulnerable communities. And also we have very expensive resource adequacy costs. So this is something that is a major concern for us in terms of our future cost and our current cost, and how do we sort of take control of that. And on a larger scale, how do we help contribute to the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, largely from a lot of the peaking plants that California has. So these all sort of help drive where we're going with our distributed energy resources program. And I'm going to describe some of the measures that we're going to be implementing here, or we are implementing now. One of our marquee program is our behind the meter distributed energy resources energy storage platform. So we're actually going a little bit of a different route with our energy storage. We're going to be, by October, we should have our software system fully deployed. And the software system is what's called a Distributed Energy Resources Management System, or DERMS platform. It allows MCE to directly control energy storage systems for customers that are enrolled in our program. So we can actually monitor and control the discharging and charging of energy storage systems. And it doesn't just do that. It can do any controllable behind the meter load or resource, a smart device, electric vehicle charging, that sort of thing. And that's the future plans for this. So really the theme, I guess, would be taking control of our own destiny. So we have 40,000 plus customers that have solar under net energy metering rates. And that's not necessarily in alignment with our costs. So we're focusing on energy storage in this program paired with existing solar PV, or solar and new storage is also included in this program. But really what we want to do is take control of this, use this as a virtual power plant so we can dispatch these systems and reduce our RA costs, keep our costs low, improve resiliency, and create other opportunities. We've also got a couple other pilot programs that we're working on, a smart EV charging pilot and demand flex market, where we're actually just paying third-party aggregators for all of their metered demand response or energy efficiency. I want to get into the energy storage program because I think that's really very interesting one. The 2-year program goal is to deploy 15 megawatt hours of dispatchable customer-sited energy storage. And ultimately, we want to increase that to 70 megawatts by 2025 or beyond. This is just starting out now with energy storage. And it serves a lot of purposes. It provides resiliency for our customers. So they get the energy storage for backup during outage events. And the way that we manage the charging, it provides them bill savings under the time of use rates. So they're offsetting their peak demand and charging the energy storage 100% from the on-site solar. That helps lower emissions. We can also provide grid services with this, and I'll get into those in just a bit, but it's got a lot of potential benefits. It's a really exciting program. And it prioritizes vulnerable customers. This is one of the main goals that we have. 50% of our enrollments is targeting low-income or medically vulnerable customers, customers that are located in disadvantaged or low-income communities, or who have experienced 2 or more public safety power shutoffs and live in high fire threat districts. We're also providing incentives for critical facilities, police, fire, and nonprofits that support our low-income communities during times where there's an outage, planned or unplanned. So this could be shelters, food banks, that sort of thing. So it's built on top of or in conjunction with the self-generation incentive program to try and leverage those funds. This gives you a sense for really how comprehensive the program is. This is not something that's been done anywhere else like this, anywhere in the country that I'm aware of. We have, as our program management and engineering consulting firm, TRC, and they are the main program manager, and they have all the subcontracts, or a majority of the subcontracts, with other program participants. And EchoShift Consulting is providing some technical support for us as well. We have as our developers SunPower, Gridscape, Electric Power, MBL Energy, THG, Emporia, and Interlogic. So these are the developers that are providing the equipment and system design. And each of those either does their own installation, or they have subcontractors that they're installing. They're doing the installation. And we're trying to prioritize those that are located within our community, or have some sort of presence within our service territory to help create jobs. The software platforms that we have 2 major software platforms. The Concerto DERMS platform is the control platform that allows us to monitor and control and dispatch these systems. And the eTrack Plus that you see there, that's a project management software that helps us keep track of every single customer that enrolls, where their system is, from signing the contract to getting their permits, to installation, interconnection, permission to operate, and the entire end-to-end, connecting with our customer information system so that we can exchange information and data between the developers through this platform, and it also connects to the Concerto platform. Key component of this is also workforce development. We want to try and create jobs, particularly for low-income members of our community. I actually just came back an hour or so ago from doing a presentation to Rising Sun. They've got a cohort of 15 or 18 folks that are going through this training program And our goal is to try and place as many of them as possible in jobs doing installation with the companies that you see over there on our trade ally developers. We're working also with Grid Alternatives to do solar and storage under a grant that we received from the Marin Community Foundation. And that's a very focused project, $750,000 grant that we received to support that work. And we're also launching a financing offer for our customers. And I won't get into the details here, but we're providing some upfront funding for our customers to help offset the costs. We did some bridge funding to avoid out-of-pocket costs for some of our residential customers. We're providing monthly bill credits for customers. And for our commercial customers, we're paying 22 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour we discharge during the peak period, 4 to 9 p.m. And the financing is going to launch this month. It's going to be below market interest rates, 0% for our low-income customers for 10 years, 2.5% for 10 years for other impacted customers, and 5.5% for 5 years for everyone else. We're providing the capital. NIFE, the National Energy Infrastructure Foundation, is providing the origination and servicing. And this is really, I can get into this later, this is our DERMS platform and how it works. But ultimately, what we're doing is doing peak load management. So we're shifting the load away from that peak, avoiding our resource adequacy or capacity costs. And then for public safety power shutoffs, as we just got noticed today, that some of our communities, and yesterday, some of our communities are going to be affected by this. We'll pre-charge the battery so that customers will have a full charge to last through that. And they will have the ability to also last through unplanned outages. Future capabilities, adding EV chargers, heat pump hot water heaters, smart thermostats, smart appliances. There's a whole host of things that we can do. And there's other value streams that we can extract out of this distribution infrastructure deferral. So we can actually leverage these systems to avoid infrastructure investments that PG&E might need to make and get paid for that. There's a couple other pilots I mentioned. I don't want to get too much into the details because I don't have a lot of time. But we do have a smart EV charging pilot, which is a managed charging pilot, all controlled by a third party via an app. And that's something that, if successful, we can integrate into our DERMS platform in the future. And then we have the demand flex market, which is essentially it's a lower effort but lower reward version that we're creating a marketplace where we're paying for peak load reduction or energy efficiency at a set price. And it's being done through Recurve, who's providing the platform and the measurement verification, and a whole host of different providers, from energy efficiency, demand response, solar. A wide variety of providers can sign up for this program, enroll their customers, their aggregators. We're not participating in the CAISO market. This is not a wholesale market participation. This is just like the energy storage program. We're reducing our demand, so we're reducing our resource adequacy forecasts and our costs. So that's really, in a nutshell, we're trying to take this into, control our own destiny, really. And I know I'm out of time, so I didn't have a chance to go through all of the questions that you had, but I'm happy to answer anything you got right away, Eric.
Great, Jim. Just thank you so much. We'll have some time after we're able to go through the first round of presentations. But I'll just say that I'm just most excited about the work that you're doing. I think you're trailblazing these DERMS platforms and just activating innovative market participants and just unleashing them into the community to help achieve those goals. So I'm just very excited about that work and look forward to we're watching that with great interest.
Yes, we're taking a lot of the first innovator type of bruises and bumps on this, but it's definitely got a tremendous amount of value, and this is really a marquee program that we're going to be relying on in the future more and more. So that 70 megawatt hours, I think, is just really scratching the surface of what we might be able to do with this, and it really is, I think, important for CCAs in particular, because we can, rather than relying on out-of-state purchases or purchase power agreements, just rely on the load that we've already got. Matching our load, aligning that with our costs, gives us a lot of control. And that's really, really valuable.
And creates value for everybody in the system, right?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So let's move on to a neighbor of MCE, the Sonoma Clean Power. We're really lucky to have with us Carolyn Glanton, who's a program manager at Sonoma Clean Power. Let's jump into it. Thank you, Carolyn, for joining us.
Great, thanks for the invitation to speak to the group. So Sonoma Clean Power, our mission is turning the tide on the climate crisis through bold ideas and practical programs. So goals from our Joint Powers Authority when we were founded is actually, the main one is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our other goals are to provide electric power and other forms of energy to customers at competitive costs, designing and carrying out programs to reduce total energy consumption, stimulating and sustaining our local economy, that's a big one, and specifically by developing or promoting local distributed energy resources. And of course, we are dedicated to long-term electric rate stability, energy security, reliability, and resilience. So a few ways we're looking at distributed energy resources. I'll first talk about our Grid Savvy program, which is our demand response program. We also offer assistance with the self-generation incentive program to help install battery storage systems throughout our territory. And we've just opened an advanced energy center, which is a storefront here in downtown Santa Rosa, which has a lot of these distributed energy resources available. Starting with Grid Savvy, similar to some of the other programs you've heard, this helps to shape our load to match the supply, and specifically using it as a resource to displace more dirty power, gas-powered plants, wanting to reduce that. Something special about our program is our customers are able to participate in multiple offerings, so that's a benefit. And then really excited about getting customers on board with these technologies and relying on them to make a cleaner grid. So how this works is Sonoma Clean Power is the load serving entity. We work very closely with Olivine, who is our demand response aggregator. And then of course, we have a variety of technology and fulfillment vendors that we partner with as well. We incentivize the programs, the products in our program, and we are committed to equity and making sure that these programs are inclusive. So really trying to reduce that upfront cost that is a barrier to many people, especially low-income customers. And we also offer $5 a month bill credit for those who participate in Grid Savvy. So currently we have heat pump water heaters, we have smart thermostats, and we have electric vehicle chargers in the program. We will be adding behavioral, which is a little bit different. It'll be $1 per energy saving event instead of the $5 per month. But again, this could be in addition to those who have the technologies that are smart and connected to the grid. But we're really hoping that this widens the participants in the program. Anyone could sign up and reduce their energy demand by turning off lights, and reducing their energy use through behaviors. Something special about that is they can also donate their savings to a community nonprofit partner. Excuse the typo in the slide. We will be launching a battery energy storage offering in Q4 of this year, and that incentive structure is still being designed. So how we're looking at the load modifying strategies, different devices have different load modifying strategies. So with the heat pump water heaters, we are doing a permanent load shift on a daily basis. For behavioral, EV chargers, and smart thermostats, it is event-based, and that's to reduce our peak. And for batteries, we're looking at a combination of both of those to make things extra fun, looking at a daily permanent load shift, but also having an event-based demand response as well. So we're looking at the details of that. This program has been up and running for several years. So some of the things we've learned along the way is, it is great that we have this multi-technology offering that works for wholesale markets. It is more complex for CCA customers to enroll in demand response. So, how can we overcome those barriers? How can we make it easy? And this program has been leveraged to meet a variety of goals. We're modifying our resource adequacy, resiliency, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We have found out some other less fun things, that the enrolled demand response capacity is not equivalent to the dispatchable capacity. And there's a variety of reasons for this. The top ones we found is Wi-Fi and internet connectivity issues. So not all of these products are always online and able to respond to events. We've also seen that load profiles vary dramatically across technology during the times we're dispatching. Charging patterns for EVs are kind of all over the place. It's not necessarily during the peak times of 4 to 9 p.m. Batteries can discharge outside of peak periods, but smart thermostats do seem to be more predictable. Some other things is that the distribution networks for some devices can be challenging to get those installed. For example, heat pump water heaters and batteries. And what we found is customers are really excited to participate in demand response. We've had a lot of early adopters, and we are very excited to launch the behavior offering so that anyone can participate. They don't have to buy a smart device. Really quickly touch on our SCHIP assistance program. This helps finance the battery storage systems in our territory and leverage state funding. We help contractors with paperwork and the application process. And maybe most importantly, it provides the incentive upfront to customers rather than receiving it post-installation. Something about this is that the batteries funded through this program will be able to participate in our future grid savvy battery offering. Our Advanced Energy Center, this also layers on top of our grid savvy program. So we have products available here, induction cooktop, heat pump water heaters. We have our smart thermostats here, as well as some battery products as well. And this is a really fun space. Encourage you all to check out our website. But this is where customers can come in, check out these technologies. And again, we have those specially negotiated discounts on those products. Something to also help bring down the cost is we offer 0% financing up to $10,000 on select technologies, and that's payable back through the utility bill. And we're really encouraging customers to look at that. And with that, I'll say thank you and look forward to talking more in the breakout rooms.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. The website for the Advanced Energy Center is beautiful, and I'm really excited that you guys have commissioned that space for the community education, and I'm looking forward to visiting sometime soon. So, all right, let's keep moving here. We're doing well on time. So now we've got our final special guest with us, JP Ross. JP is with us from East Bay Community Energy, and JP is the Vice President of Local Development, Electrification, and Innovation. JP, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for inviting me, and very interesting panel discussion. I think can see how CCAs are a bit of a petri dish. We get to test out different methodologies and approaches to meeting these challenging targets. And thankfully, it's a very collaborative group. And so there's a lot of information sharing that we are all constantly doing because we all want each other to succeed, which is a pretty good place, I think, to be in light, again, of the challenges we faced. So EBCE is serving about 650,000 accounts in Alameda County, and we've just added the city of Tracy in San Joaquin County to our service territory, and that's about 6.5 terawatt hours of annual load that we are now serving. Overall, our goal is to be providing 100% of that electricity from renewables by 2030. I think as we're thinking about DERs and what we're trying to do on the programmatic and customer side, one interesting thing to think about is that 6.5 terawatt hours is current electricity load. As we decarbonize and electrify transportation and buildings, then we should be expecting to approximately triple that load. So if we think that providing 6.5 terawatt hours of renewable electricity that follows our load shape is a challenge, when that's like 20 terawatt hours, that gets to be more than 3 times as challenging. And so there's definitely a lot of work to do. So some of the things that we have done prior to launching, we invested in a local development business plan, which was a community engagement exercise on what EVCE could be doing to stimulate local development. And there's a lot of information there on programs, and I believe that documentation has been shared, as well as building a data and analytics platform and team to kind of facilitate meeting the objectives of the organization and our local development initiatives. So we've done a lot on the data side, and we're really trying to make data-driven decisions, as are many of our CCA counterparts. But I definitely refer people to the local development business plan. It's got a lot of good information about community development opportunities. We have programs that are really focused on 5 different areas at this point in time. So we have transportation electrification, building electrification, energy efficiency, resilience, and the 5th program area is our connected communities work, which is really about enabling our customers who are challenged facing their electricity bills to pay those bills and avoid disconnections. We actually started that work and that program 2 years ago prior to COVID. It became all the more relevant with COVID and the accumulated debt and challenges that people have been paying, have had paying their bills over the last year and a half. As we think about DERs and resource adequacy and the commodity value of DERs, it's funny that the opportunity for kind of supply side resource adequacy, I think is, as we've seen by the previous presentations, is there's a lot of kind of trying to work around the resource adequacy markets. We obviously participate in those RA markets. We have compliance obligations and are actively working to meet those compliance obligations with RA contracts. I would point to a couple of things that we're doing on the programmatic and procurement side that are aimed at achieving those the goal of resource adequacy, but have a slightly different tint. So one is our Resilient Home Program. The Resilient Home Program is an active engagement with Sunrun, who we signed a contract with about 1.5 years ago. And that was through a solicitation that we issued for services in conjunction with, in partnership with Peninsula Clean Energy. I think Peter's on the call. Hi, Peter. Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Power. We ended up signing a contract with Sunrun for what will amount to about 5 megawatts of load modification through aggregated solar and storage assets on single and multifamily residential dwellings. So a couple things there. The concept of load modification has been discussed now both by Jim and Carolyn. So the idea there is that we aggregate up these batteries, we dispatch them between 4 and 8 p.m., 4 and 8, 5 and 9. And we are actually now in the process and have for the last year, 2 years, filed with the California Energy Commission in our April peak demand forecast, a forecasted reduction in our peak load because of the dispatch of those batteries. And by reducing our forecasted peak, we are then able to reduce our resource adequacy obligation. And so we've been working with the CEC for a couple of years to enable that process in coalition with our other CCA partners. And this is an example of how the regulatory environment wasn't necessarily enabling CCAs to do everything that we should be able to do. So prior to 2 years ago, there was literally a tab on an Excel spreadsheet that enabled the investor-owned utilities to submit for behind the meter load modifying resources, and there was no tab for CCAs. So it was something that PG&E and Edison and SDG&E can do that we couldn't. So our first task was like asking the CEC to add another tab to the spreadsheet. These are the mechanical things you need to do in order to enable folks to, participate in these opportunities. So we did that, and then in April of 2020, we filed a very small portfolio of load modifying assets with Sunrun to the CEC to just prove out that the process worked. And over time now, we have signed up multiple hundreds of single family residents, as well as we're getting to about 1,200 multifamily affordable housing units that will all have solar and storage installed on these residences, and then we're aggregating up those batteries to deploy them during those peak hours. And importantly, with load modification, one element is it's not event based, so we dispatch those batteries every day. It's one of the things our procurement team is very happy about. In a lot of DR contracts, when you contract for a resource, you might pay for it every month. But then when you actually want it to come online, that resource is often bid in at exorbitant prices. That means the resource doesn't get called. So you're paying for something and it actually doesn't come onto the grid during the hours where it's needed to avoid blackouts and extremely high prices. Whereas the load modifying resource comes on every day. So our procurement team knows that they don't have to buy energy all days, not just on those DR days. One other thing that we've done is signed a hedge with OhmConnect that is not providing resource adequacy, but it is basically a DR hedge that calls those megawatt hours online during high-priced hours. So that doesn't actually meet our RA obligation, but it's another kind of different way that we are procuring local resources to reduce our peak demands that it mitigates high price exposure. We also have a lot of work on municipal critical facilities. We're developing a fleet of assets on our critical public facilities that will be going to market to procure in the next quarter or so. This is going to be probably 150 to 200 solar and storage systems on libraries, police stations, fire stations, food banks, senior centers across our facilities. A couple of different things here. We've already evaluated a cost-effective portfolio through remote analyses. We've just dispatched independent engineers to do site visits on all of these facilities that we plan to build, and they will filter out the facilities for which solar and storage not feasible. And then we'll issue a solicitation whereby EBCE will be the counterparty to our cities. So we will have a single PPA with each of our cities, and then that single PPA will be issued to the market, and we will be the other counterparty to the developer owner operators. So EBCE sits in the middle, reducing transactions costs of legal fees and kind of all the hard groundwork that needs to be done to develop solar and storage assets. And we will also be looking at what are the ancillary services and resources that we can get from those distributed meters. So I know I'm running out of time. That's a little bit on the kind of the RA commodity side. There's a lot of other very exciting work. I think one very interesting thing is transportation electrification. We need to get gasoline out of vehicles, and the battery capacity and energy associated with that will be something we need to service, hopefully with renewables, and also how I can utilize that battery, those battery resources in a flexible way is going to be a huge challenge and opportunity going forward. That's super exciting as we think about, for Alameda County, we should have upwards of 80,000 EVs in the next 5 years. By 2025 would be our portion of the California 1.5 million vehicle target. That's a tremendous amount of capacity and energy driving around that we need to figure out a way to capitalize on.
Great, JP, thank you for that that conversation. For me, like I think that the work that you're doing around innovating this procurement and contracting approach for resilient facilities across the region is extremely exciting. What are you seeing as what's the risks in that? Like, meaning like, what are the barriers that you're seeing to that being successful?
So Eric, are you talking about the load modification opportunities?
I'm talking about the 150 to 200 municipal facilities across the region that you're aggregating procurement using a contracting and procurement mechanism for.
Yeah, so I think there'll be a few things here. One, we're issuing this solicitation and working with our cities under some government procurement code that requires the fleet of assets to be cost effective over the term of the contract. So this is probably a 20-year PPA. It'll be, a 0% escalator. We're not going to saddle our cities with a high escalator, obviously, and that is somewhat determined by the facilities that each city has. And so meaning we're not going to do, only a bunch of 5 kilowatt fire stations with poor roofs, and a 15 kilowatt hour battery. That's just not really going to work. So we have to have a fleet of assets that pays for itself over time through energy savings. And so making sure that we kind of issue the best portfolio that can be cost effective, because storage is not terribly cost effective right now, is a challenge. But I'm pretty excited about the opportunities that we have. And I do think that, this will be something that we'll be able to scale across all of our cities.
Great. Okay, so thank you for that, JP. So we've got a half hour. We were intending to do breakout sessions, but I think because of the size of the group that we have, I think it is going to be best for us to stay together and just ask questions and have a conversation together over the next 20 minutes or so. If anybody is vehemently opposed to that and wants to get in a room with one of these folks, let me know now. But otherwise, perhaps we can make a personal introduction and you can ask your questions if they don't get answered here. So let's go that route. Beverly, I see your hands up. Go ahead. You're still muted, Beverly.
Yeah, sorry. I had a few questions. So one of the things I wanted to know is let's see, who did that? Oh, Jim Bach has the EV charging pilot. Can you tell me what you're doing? Are you doing specifically a bidirectional thing? And I would ask that also of East Bay. Are you doing a pilot where you are doing bidirectional, because we're having a problem trying to figure out how to legally do that? I had a few other questions, but I'll take that one for now.
Yeah, so for MCE's Smart EV Charging program, it's managed charging only. This is not vehicle to building, vehicle to grid. Not at this time. There's still a limited number of vehicles that can do V2G. And it's a lot more complicated. So for us, it's just managed charging under this program, which does provide some value still. So we're still working on future program rollouts, but I think the market has to kind of catch up with that, with more vehicles that are capable of doing vehicle to grid, vehicle to building.
And I think, Carolyn, that second question is to you, because I'll just say, we're not doing any residential charging. It's all DC fast charging, kind of, on the concept that we can't, lots of residential charging is for nighttime charging, and we just don't have a lot of renewables at night. So we need to be doing DC fast charging during the middle of the day when we have low cost renewables. We put about $250,000 in our budget this year for a vehicle to building pilot at one of our critical resilient facilities. So we will be testing that out, but we're not currently doing anything. And I think, Carolyn, you guys have your program as well.
Yeah, so similar to Jim's comment, our program is also managed charging for residential chargers. And yeah, the times that people are charging is not during peak times mostly, which is good. But we're not able to really use those in the same way as other load modifying resources. And Beverly, remind me if that answered your question or if you had another part to it.
I actually do. Are you guys managing it, or are you making some agreements with the EV owners about when to charge or not charge? When you say, I don't know how you're calling it, controlled. So does that mean you're controlling it, or you make agreements, get it controlled?
Yes, so we would send out a signal to their device that's installed in their property to charge or not to charge.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify for MCE, sorry, we are using a third-party EV charge, I think it is, via an app. So we're relying on the third party for this service right now. Future, like I said, could be integrated in our own DERMS platform.
And are you paying the EV owners to do this, to charge at a particular time?
Yes, there is some compensation. I don't know what that is yet. I think they're still trying to finalize that before it launches in a couple of months.
Thank you.
Matthew, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think, we're in a little bit more of a larval stage on this, but I think our intent is the same, to have it be more of just about managing charging time. The one area where we're looking specifically more at like vehicle to building or vehicle to grid is around buses, and particularly school buses. And they're bigger batteries. They have kind of a more controllable duty cycle. And then, for us, there's that sort of resilience opportunity of like, hey, if you can run a walk-in freezer that's got a bunch of food in it during a power outage, that could be a good opportunity. And so we are looking at vehicle to grid on the school bus side of things.
Well, the buses do already have bidirectional, whereas most of the EVs do not yet.
Great.
Or not allowed.
Great. Let's move to, thanks for those questions, Beverly. Seth.
You can hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. One of them is for Jim Bach, and I thought I heard you say that you were getting compensated for eliminating some of the PG&E distribution resources through some of your programs. And I wondered what the mechanism is for getting compensation for that.
Jim, you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, we're not yet getting compensated. That's really a future enhancement. There's a proceeding that's been going on a long time, the distribution infrastructure deferral proceeding. And the PUC has created a mechanism by which the utilities have to start looking at how they can avoid making infrastructure investments. Essentially, in the transmission vernacular, it's a non-wires alternatives. And when they do that, they'll identify circuits where they need X megawatts, megawatt hours of deferred capacity, reduced capacity, and we could bid the systems in there. So what we would have to do, however, is we'd have to look at what the penetration of customers we have on a specific circuit to determine, could we actually reduce enough capacity during that time period that they would need it. And we'd have to figure out how to manage the multiple uses of the energy storage. Could we still do a portion of the peak demand reduction if say the circuit is peaking at an earlier time? We still have to figure out what the economics are, what the actual compensation would have to be for customers, but we would compensate them for that. So there's a lot of details to still be worked out on that, but it is a future value stream that we do want to explore. And I think there's some real potential value in that one.
Thank you. And I had one other question for everybody about workplace charging. If you guys have had some traction in successively deploying that so you can get people charging during the day.
This is Carolyn with Sonoma Clean Power. It's been several years, but we've looked into workplace charging, and we had several meetings with employers and encouraged it, and worked with some other regional jurisdictions in doing so. But for some reason, we didn't get very far, and I don't really know why. That was a little bit before my time. But we have also recently been administering the Cali VIP grant program through our jurisdiction. And so that will be installing high DC fast charging and workplace charging as well. So that did go well.
Yeah, I would just say we haven't focused on workplace yet. We recently, we just received notification about getting funding from BackMud to, we're going to be building a DC fast charging hub in West Oakland that'll have 17 DC fast chargers in a disadvantaged community in Oakland. We also have a second project in one of our Tri-Valley cities, and a third project as well. In our Northern Territory, we'll be building, owning, and operating these DC fast chargers that'll be for daytime charging. Be a mix of 75 and 175 kilowatt DC fast chargers. So these first three projects are kind of pilot projects for EDCE to own and operate in partnership and collaboration with our cities. And we're looking to scale that effort as well. I think workplace charging is another venue there, but we're really focused and have built a tool that basically helps us identify locations that are near high density multi-unit dwelling regions, as well as areas where we have high pickup and drop off from the TNC operators, as well as a mix of other retail and other amenities that'll make it convenient for people to utilize those chargers.
Yeah, we're in somewhat a similar situation. We own and operate a public EV charging network across the county, which has a number of sites, and again, that's to make it available for both workplace and just general public charging. The focus of that network initially was to ensure sort of connectivity and eliminate range anxiety. So it was more about geographic access. But now, as we're kind of entering a second phase of that, it's more about enabling daytime charging and usage during times of abundant renewables.
Great. Is that good for you, Seth?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Jim.
Hi, I wanted to address this mostly to JB Ross, but maybe other people might want to comment. I had asked earlier offline about people power in Oakland. Very interesting model of fractional solar shares that are generated by small communities of people who aren't ordinarily considered qualified buyers of DER equipment. And I want to know, how does that look like to the CCA? How does it look like to East Bay Community Energy? How hard are they to handle? I know they have a terrific load in terms of member expectations to manage. and you gave them a grant, how did that help them? And is there a future in that type of model?
Yeah, sure. So this organization, People Power Community Cooperative that Jim is mentioning, just a little bit of background, they basically work within communities to provide a community ownership model where different people in the community can invest in a PV or PV and storage system on a community member's home or business, and then also earn the ability to kind of participate in the benefits of that system, as well as earn interest on their investment. So it's a community ownership model. For us, Jim, as the LSE, it looks just like any other net metering system. It looks like a net metered PV system, just like any other one. This does have the ability to expand ownership and value generation into the community, which certainly has some benefits on engagement, awareness, and local investment yielding local benefits. As I noted, it's having been involved in the solar market for 15 years, like the scalability is a challenge. I think it's hard to, really build this into something that is across tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of homes and, participant investors. But I think it's a great model, and that's why we supported it through our grant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Justin.
Hey guys, I just wanted to follow up on the question I asked in the chat a little bit, which is interesting. You said about the Tesla Powerwall not having an integration yet to the systems. I'm sure that if there is a single vendor that they can integrate with, they would probably end up doing that. But my follow-up question is, what are the challenges with getting all these technologies to integrate, and how far along that path are we? And then if you have time, I was just wondering if you guys have thought about the different time of use pricing and giving different time of use pricing to DER users, or are the per kilowatt incentives you're offering just designed to offset that discrepancy between time of use pricing and true market pricing? Because to me, that seems like a big problem. Is my time of use pricing on my home is way different than what the real market pays for that price at, say, 1 p.m.
Yeah, this is Jim. Let me answer the first part of that question. MCE decided very early on that we wanted to rely on open source standards for our communication protocol, and that provides us with the greatest flexibility. So we're not locked into one specific DERMS vendor, software vendor. We could build our own system in-house if we wanted to, and using OpenADR as our communications protocol, that allows our system controller, called a virtual top node, which is sending and receiving signals and status of the battery, state of charge, all that sort of information, to either the individual devices or to an aggregator's what's called a virtual end node. And as long as that virtual end node can communicate using this OpenADR communications protocol, then we're fine. We can control that. And THG is one of our providers, and they actually have more or less a translator device that can take a proprietary communications system and translate it to OpenADR and send that signal back up to us and relay our signals, the command signals, to the devices. But there are certain vendors, Tesla is definitely one of them, that don't really play well with others in the sandbox. They really like doing their own proprietary communications and control protocols, and that's fine. We can build an API connection into the DERMS platform if we want to. We just don't want to do that. So there are ways of actually controlling that if we want to do that, but we're trying to promote open source platforms and protocols as much as possible. I think it's to the benefit of just the industry in general. And there's an open ADR organization that is trying to promote this. So a lot more people are actually adopting this open source communications protocol more and more. We're seeing that. So that's on the first question. On the second part of your question, could you remind me what your question was?
Yeah, it was just about the time of use pricing and the discrepancy between what most people have as their time of use, which are set and then, you know, don't change for months or years, and the actual market pricing. Is using the DER resources a way to kind of smooth those discrepancies out?
Yeah, for our program, we are providing all the customers have to switch to the most current time of use, 4 to 9 p.m. period peak. Those rates are getting more reflective of actual costs. They're not entirely there. We're providing a bill credit as sort of a proxy for the additional value that we're getting by reducing our peak capacity. For our larger customers, commercial customers, we're actually paying what we think is the avoided cost of that resource adequacy. That's where the 22 cents is, and we're paying, I think, about 19 cents to our flex market participants. So somewhere between 13 and 22 cents in that range is the avoided cost for resource adequacy. And we will pay that for every kilowatt hour that is metered and dispatched either directly by us through our program or through these aggregators under our flex demand marketplace program. So that's really what's supposed to reflect that value as these performance-based payments. And we'd like to move to more performance-based payments to the extent possible, assuming we can meter that. It really doesn't make sense for a lot of the small customers. So you got to use sort of proxies, and this is where the monthly credit goes.
Right. So let me zoom out a little bit and ask more kind of organizational questions. In terms of how has within your organization has priorities around distributed energy resources changed over time, and has the PSPS events, resiliency and resource adequacy kind of shifted your leadership's orientation to DER, or has it how has that kind of that affected that as a DER as a priority?
I'll jump in real quick and say that this has been a priority. Vikin Kasarjian is our chief operating officer, and he's former ISO guy. So this has been a big interest of his. It's the reason I joined MCE, because I've been involved in DER policy for many, many years in California and throughout the West. And I really see this as the future of where the industry is going, where the real trends are, because if you can control at the loads, it's much more effective than having to control that via long distance transmission lines, power plants at the end of those lines, and distribution facilities. So it's much cleaner, easier, it's much more controllable. It's really in line with the CCA, because we're looking at locally controlled resources, locally controlled loads. That has been in place since I joined, and I think it's just going to continue to expand. It's a small part of our portfolio right now, a very small part, but we see a lot of potential for it in the future. And I think, right now our integrated resources plan has mention of that, but we are going to be trying to rely more and more on it as we go into the future.
Yeah, I'll just say, from our perspective, as I mentioned, we've been doing energy efficiency and sort of customer-based distributed energy resource programs for like a decade and a half before we launched the CCA program. And, we still have, at least twice as many, if not more, staff focused on, integrated demand side management than we do on our CCA operations. And so I would say we've always been focused on it. And if there's been any change with PSPS events and kind of some of the reliability things, it's calcified that commitment to say, oh, this isn't just good for the customer, it's actually good for our CCA business to be focusing on these things, and the importance to the community, became even more clear to us, particularly as a remote rural community. And so, it's just added fuel to the fire of focusing on that wherever we can.
Yeah, and for Sonoma Clean Power, we were focused on some other technologies, but then due to PSPS and wildfires, we saw proliferation of battery storage systems. And so we definitely wanted to see how, we could incorporate that into the Grid Savvy program. And what we're seeing is in the wild, those batteries are not always programmed in the best way for either the grid or the customer. So, how can we fix that in having customers participate in a program and, benefiting both the customer and the grid for those battery systems.
JP, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. I think the focus on how we can maximize both the commodity value to the CCA as well as the community value of DERs is a big focus. I think to Carolyn's last point, making sure that these resources in their distributed nature show up and are kind of programmed to show up, and we can complete M&V such that we can prove that they're showing up is, it's a much bigger challenge to do that with lots of distributed assets where there are multiple parties who can benefit from those assets versus, the centralized market. But that's what we have to accelerate as we see these DERs accelerating onto the grid.
Great, thank you, JP. So I'm not going to take. We just have a few minutes left. I'm going to ask. I got two more questions for folks, just to help us again, kind of be zoomed out here as we are on our own kind of evolution as a Central Coast region. So one question I have is, from your perspective, what is the most kind of important, like critical structure that you have in your organization that's supporting DERs? Is it a policy that's in place, or is it a goal that's set, or is it a cultural issue, or is it like just having staffing dedicated? Like what is structure do you think makes the biggest difference in being able to move your work forward? Matthew, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think, the fundamental thing is having it be kind of baked into, both our organizational, founding document in our JPA agreement, saying that we're going to focus on these kinds of programs, and then, having that articulated in our strategic plan. And so, having that as sort of our marching orders means that, every 6 months we have to go back and report, like, well, what are you doing on that? And so, I think having that at the sort of organizational level, and then, obviously then it comes down to having the staff resources committed to actually implementing it so that we can get it done. So.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add or offer? Carolyn?
Everything Matthew said.
Okay, great. Jim?
Yeah, I would just say that, this really started with a commitment from the top and just sort of a vision for how we want to take control of our costs and our future. And, having that support and vision from the top is really, really important. Having the staff and the structure to figure out how do we implement this. This is in our customer programs portfolio right now, but we're figuring out how we want to integrate power resources into this. So it's still a little bit of a growth and learning process for us. But with that commitment from the top and from the board of directors, it's made it's made this possible. As we would not have this if the board hadn't authorized our resiliency fund, $7 million resiliency fund. I know it would have not happened if we didn't have support from executive level to carry this out. And that's how I got brought on board to this, is to really execute and carry this thing out.
Got it. JP, did you want to add anything?
No, I think the previous folks said it all.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I'll ask is, like, we've heard today from all of you that you're doing really important, innovative work, and as JP had said, there's a petri dish occurring where there's lots of playing and testing and overcoming, and so I'm looking from the perspective of like packaging what's being learned and transferring that for other CCAs to to take in, because from my perspective, I'm seeing like, how do we steal what's being done and implement it where we're at? It just seems like we could accelerate implementation and scale much faster. So what, do you have structures in place that and resources in place that allow for that sort of packaging and transferring, or is that a gap that you see?
Maybe I'll start. I think it's a little bit of a gap. I think, as public agencies, we're all, sort of open books to some extent. And then, even beyond that, sort of technical piece of it, I think there's a lot of just mutual support and, kind of a family vibe among CCAs of everyone helping each other. And I've never asked for, guidance or input from another CCA that wasn't, graciously and generously given, and we try to return that. I think maybe where there's a gap is not on the intent part, but on just sort of the capacity piece of it. Of certainly for us, it's like we don't have like somebody whose job it is to be like pushing these things out and packaging it up. And so I think that's something that we've talked about some at like the Cal CCA level of starting to ramp up that sort of best practices sharing element of the organization, and looking for venues. And, obviously there's starting to be more like brown bag presentations and more of that going on. So I think just kind of continuing that trend to kind of, help push it out and not just have it be kind of people having to pull and poke around and find what they're looking for.
JP?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, we have group kind of, meetings and collaboration forums across, multiple levels of the organization. I know on the program side, the programs folks, meet in a lot of different regular meetings along kind of the different categories that we've discussed: transportation, buildings, efficiency, resilience, DERs. And I find those to be quite helpful. And, as previously mentioned, there's a lot of goodwill and openness to how we are operating these activities. I'm quite happy with the kind of the Petri dish model. I think, traditionally, when we narrow in on what we think is the right vision, we tend to get it wrong the first time. And so the opportunity to kind of bounce things around and try things out, I think is going to yield much accelerated kind of good solutions versus, people kind of keeping with something that's working okay, but not accelerating this transition to DERs at the pace that we all know we need.
Great. Thanks, JP. Anybody else called to answer on that? Jim or Carolyn? We can move to wrapping up here. Okay. Okay, great. Well, I just want to thank our special guests for coming and spending an hour and a half with us. From my perspective, hugely valuable to have you together, sharing the great work that you're doing, and for us to be able to be inspired by it, and to be able to share that with some of our elected leaders on this call today. And I just see just possibilities, like, just again, really appreciative for your collaborative approach and willingness to come and be generous with your time. So I really want to make that clear. The other thing is, just in the last moments that we have, I want to share with folks, hold on one second here. Managing screens. Just for other folks that are on the call, in particular, I want to just highlight that this is part of a series of webinars that we're having to continue this conversation together as a community and in support of our community choice program. And so we've got at least 2 more scheduled webinars asking the questions: what do DRs actually mean to our community? And I think we've heard some important pieces of that today that we can dig into deeper. And that's coming up October 19th during the same time slot. And then December 14th, a question like, what are the roles and opportunities for our municipalities? And what is, and I think we've seen a little bit of that today too, in terms of the work that EBC is doing and others. And so looking to dig in deeper into those conversations. So we've come to the end of our time. Again, I want to thank everybody, all the participants for joining us today, our special guests, and of course, Brett Garrett for running technology. You did a great job today. And then thank you to Romero Institute and Let's Green California for being a partner in deploying these webinars. And with that, we will bring our conversation to a close. Thank you so much.